Welcome back to America Decides. You know, we don't do a lot of predicting of the future here, but this you can be certain of. Starting Monday, after President-elect Trump is sworn in, immigration policy is going to noticeably change in this country. And I want to talk to one of our in-house experts about that, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, who is one of the sharpest and best immigration reporters in Washington. All right. I want to start with some basics so the audience can walk along with us. I want to show the graphic we have, ladies and gentlemen, of ICE deportations over the many years. Obama administration, Trump administration, Biden administration. Please put that up. Okay, you can see in red, those are the Trump years. They were they were higher in aggregate in the Obama years.
That's right.
They were very low, noticeably lower in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. Then this huge spike. So the last year of the Biden administration actually higher than any one year in the Trump administration.
A 10-year high, actually.
Yes, 10-year high. That's actually just a way to understand what this country has been doing under different administrations when it comes to deportations. What can we expect on Monday, Camilo, in terms of announcements, actions from this incoming administration?
Well, Major, we should expect the incoming administration to move aggressively and quickly to reshape federal immigration and border policy, including by undoing many Biden administration immigration programs. That includes initiatives that currently allow migrants abroad to come here legally. That could mean scaling back the refugee admissions program, also ending Biden administration parole programs that basically allow people who have sponsors to fly into the U.S. legally to relieve pressure at the border. As an alternative to crossing the border illegally, the Biden administration set up these channels so people could come here in a safe, legal, and orderly way. But the Trump administration, the incoming administration, argues, just like Republicans do, that this is an overreach of federal immigration authority, that this is not allowed in the current law, and that these programs should be dismantled. The concern among advocates is that if you do that, then more people are going to start crossing the border illegally.
You're going to pressurize the borders, either at ports of entry or in very dangerous places that are less thoroughly and aggressively patrolled by Border
So
Patrol.
Significant portion of this, Major, is undoing Biden administration policy, but another significant portion is reinstating policies from the first Trump administration. That includes the so-called Remain in Mexico policy that essentially requires asylum applicants to await their asylum hearings on the other side of the border in Mexico instead of being released here into the U.S. under what Republicans denounce as catch and release. That would, of course, require diplomatic talks with the Mexican government.
And cooperation
because they have to accept the returns of migrants. That also includes the reinstatement of something called worksite enforcement. These are immigration arrests, immigration sweeps at work sites like poultry plants, factories that are hiring workers who are in the country illegally. That practice was discontinued under the Biden administration, which argued that these efforts should be concentrated on the employers who are exploiting undocumented laborers, not on the undocumented immigrants themselves. But the incoming border czar, Tom Homan, has been telling us, including 60 Minutes, that worksite enforcement will continue, so we should expect what advocates would call raids on work sites very early on. And we should also expect some sort of effort to try to undo what we know as birthright citizenship. This is a long-standing interpretation of the U.S. Constitution that affords children who are born here on American soil citizenship regardless and irrespective of who their parents are, whether they are in the country illegally. Right now, if someone who is here illegally has a child here, that child is a U.S. citizen. The incoming administration wants to reverse that 100%.
And Tom Homan has said somewhat glibly, we don't believe necessarily in family separation. So if there's a deportation order for a relative who is undocumented and their children or other relatives are U.S. citizens, the way to solve that is they all have to leave.
The families can be deported together. That's what he has been saying. And that is something that could happen because right now, according to one study, there are 4 million U.S. citizen children, Major, who are living with at least one parent who is in the country illegally without legal status. And what Homan is saying, because ICE does not have the authority to deport U.S. citizens, is that the children, or the parents rather, can opt to have their U.S. citizen children come with them to their home countries and self-deport, essentially, as opposed to the parents being deported by themselves to their home countries and leaving their children here with a sponsor or in the foster care system. But, of course, that raises the question of how these home countries actually integrate what are American citizens.
We have not heard the last of either these implementation issues or what defines family separation. Camilo Montoya-Galvez, always a pleasure.
Thanks
so
Major.
much.